God's not dead. And what of the true God? He's dead. You can't complain.
People assume that time is a strict progression of cause to effect, but actually, from a non-linear, non-subjective viewpoint, it's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
You're listening to Paranormal UK Radio.
Hello, my name is Irene Allen Block. I'm the host of Paranormal UK Radio, and tonight with me are my co-hosts Mark Johnson and Andrew Chaplin.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hello, boys.
Hello.
Okay, so we're going to have a
Happy New Year's yet? Have we done that yet?
Yes, we did.
We did.
Yeah, we did. We did that.
We did New Year's last week.
Yeah.
But I will say that, you know, when this airs in 2 days, we will be having our presidential inauguration. And boy, I've got the popcorn ready for this one because
champagne ready.
You just know it is going to be a you-know-what storm of massive proportions.
Mark, I hope you're going to send by FedEx several boxes of tissues to the Hillary Clinton campaign.
You know what? I'm waiting to see the massive protests. All these celebrities are already claiming that they're going to show up and disrupt the inauguration. I mean, it's just like
you're joking.
Yeah,
because that's how democracy works for liberals. For liberals, it only works if it's in their favour. Otherwise, they'll just riot and burn things and burn flags and stuff.
You know what? But this is a paranormal show, not a political show.
So hang on a minute, Mark. Why would celebrities lower themselves to that rate?
Well, ask Meryl Streep, who just won the Golden Globe. Instead of thanking, people for her winning her acting award, that she used it to bash Trump.
Yeah, she got a dig in on him, didn't she?
Yeah, bash Trump for something that happened months ago that she got wrong anyway. It's like people, they can't let it go. I mean, nobody did this when Obama got elected president, and we've had 8 miserable years of him, and yet they, for whatever reason. Again, I look at this as a form of brainwashing, and hell, we could do a whole show on this, that, they've gotten people so frightened, and they've put out so much propaganda and misinformation. And I've said this a million times, I'm not a Trump supporter. I didn't vote for him. But at the same time, anybody who's in this position should not have to put up with this crap if you have an election fair and square. People screaming, he's not my president. Well, you know what? I hate Obama, but you know what? He's the president. So,
yeah, but you also know, Mark, the Russians did it.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yes, the Russians did it with absolutely no proof being presented, but you know what? The Russians did it. And
weapons of mass destruction.
And this is again, okay, you got me on a slight rant here. And this is the funny thing about it. The Russians, Timmy the hacker in his mom's basement, anonymous. I don't care who did it. It's not what they did. It's what was presented. Nobody's denied that those emails, all that stuff exposed was the truth. And it exposed corruption and despicable attitudes at the worst levels and, criminal behavior. And yet they're not even touching that. They're going, oh, the Russians did this. The Russians had to do this. Trying to start a war with Russia before Trump gets into office to keep him from getting into office. It's insane. My country is absolutely, it needs Prozac, really. It seriously needs
something. Anyway, getting off that point, if anybody should hear any snorting noises going on in the background, it is my baby puppy, so I apologize in advance for it, because it does. No, it's not me. It does. She does sound rather rude sometimes, but then she is British Bulldog. So
you know that, Andrew. I do that all the time. The stinkies float through the room, and I just blame it on the dog. He did it.
All right. Okay, let's get on with the show. Tonight we have a brilliant guest with us, Barrie John. Are you there, Barrie?
Hello, guys. How are you?
We're all
bad.
fine.
How are you,
I'm really good, thank you. Sat here in my cold office at the moment, waiting for you guys. Drinking my tea.
Oh, you're lucky you got a cup of tea. I never had time to make one, and it is cold here in the UK. I've got to say that it is. It is.
It's a tad nippy.
It's woolly knicker weather at the moment. Woolly knicker weather. But Barrie, do you want to tell us something about yourself?
Yeah, not a problem. I mean, do you know what? It's funny listening to you guys because I am chuckling away, and I love a good sense of humour. You know, I love a show that cheers people up, really. I mean, people that don't know me, I mean, gosh, I've been around for 20 odd years now when I look back. And it was only really over probably the last sort of 10 years that I've got very well known, really. And that was covering a lot of the paranormal sort of world and, you know, the ghost hunting side with Most Haunted and ghost hunting companies in the UK. But, you know, I began life as a mere medium, you know, as a young guy that was getting things and wasn't sure what I was getting, and things were passed down through the family. And, you know, it opened up really many doorways for me, really. And, you know, it was great, you know, and the paranormal for me was a route that probably I fell into by accident. You know, I used to do ghost hunts for people that were really just for a little bit of fun or for a little bit of a joke, to be honest. And then it just evolved. And I think the last sort of count was something like 3,500 ghost hunts, probably nearly 4,000 ghost hunts now. And I got to the point where I got fed up of sitting in cold buildings and keep shouting out, "Is anybody there anymore?" You know, yeah. It was almost like, you know, and I think, you know, people's expectations nowadays are so advanced to what they were in you know, the time when I first started out. You know, people now want manifestations and materializations, and, you know, it's those sort of things that people are looking for, isn't it, now, in terms of the paranormal field. But, you know, my ability, my skills, whatever you call it, has taken me all around the globe. You know, it's taken me to South America, it takes me to the Middle East a lot, it takes me to Europe a lot. Obviously, I cover the UK. You know, I'm still filming little bits, but nothing majorly at the moment. But, you know, we did a Halloween show for a load of students in Newark Castle, which is not far from me. And then also I did one for children in need as well at Newark Castle not so long ago, just before Christmas. So, you know, we're still there. We're still in the limelight. We're still doing little bits of publicity and shows in the background. And I like to annoy people, let me say that.
Well, you're in good company here, I'll tell you that.
We do annoy people all the time, and we enjoy it.
Well, you know, I figure I like to give back, considering how much people seem to annoy me.
Yeah.
I think nowadays, you know, there should be fun in what we do in terms of the paranormal and mediumship, you know. And I always talk to people about modern mediumship. You know, I think it needs to develop with the times. You know, we need to bring on new people that you know, want to have fun with it in a way, and that's not being disrespectful about what we do. I love working with laughter when I'm up on stage or on a platform. You know, I like people to have a laugh because I think it raises the energy.
I think you're right, actually, Barry, because I do the same thing. Actually, I do kind of clairvoyant nights as well. Yeah. And definitely the most accurate, flowing, interesting information is when there's laughter and people are happy. If people are kind of somber with crossed arms, looking down at the floor, that's not a great energy to work with, is it?
It's not. And let's be honest, you know, it's a hard night, isn't it? You know, if you've got a difficult crew or a difficult team, it makes it a very difficult job. You know, and I always have a laugh with them because I always say I'm looking for a volunteer or a victim. You know, and people quite seem to like the enjoyment of that and the laughter side of it, because I think it keeps their interest. There's nothing worse than when you're working with one person and nobody else is almost entertained by it. You know, you've got to keep everybody entertained at the same time. You know, and with all respect, you know, that one person that you're working with, there might be something there that, you know, you can play on a little bit, or you can open up a little bit and start getting everybody else involved in a bit of laughter with it, of something that maybe their loved one did or something that they've done that the loved one's telling everybody about. And I love that. I love revealing people's secrets.
Barry, out of interest, with the paranormal investigations that you've done, roughly percentage-wise, what percentage would you say would be successful or evidential to yourself, or where things actually do happen compared to kind of nothing happens at all, and as you say, in a cold, dark room shouting out to nothing?
Yeah. Do you know, that's an absolutely brilliant question, and nobody's ever asked me that before, because the difficulty with any sort of paranormal event is it doesn't always work. Simple as that. You know, people go reading the stories that have been on the websites or what people have told them's happened before. And I always say to them, you've got to go in with an open mind. You know, it might be totally different. Nothing might happen. Something might happen. And I think when you're asking me about probably percentage-wise, I mean, the way that I always do it, I always take tools along, as I call it. So I'll always take like a table for table tipping. We'll take, obviously, glasses for divination. Sometimes I'll take the psychic trumpet. Yeah, so I think there's nothing worse than people when they're sat in a room on a silent vigil and calling out and just waiting for something to happen. But I have to be honest and agree with you on this, Andrew, that, you know, in terms of events, the piece of paranormal activity that people want is probably very, very minute, and I bet you're lucky if it's 1 or 2% of an event, and that's me just throwing figures at it roughly, because, you know, people, you've got to appreciate that a lot of the people that have been on our events have never done anything in terms of spiritual work, so they don't actually know what they're looking for. You know, they don't actually know how to generate it, how to generate energy, how to make the room pick up. So, as I say, that in terms of paranormal activity, it's probably very, very small, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Okay, Mark, have you got anything you want to add to that?
Well, you do events, so don't you, Andrew? So you'd understand that more than what I.
Yeah. I mean,
But all paranormal activity is not you don't switch a switch and it just happens like that.
Yeah,
you know, it's a lot of waiting.
There's no guarantees. I mean, I would say probably 50%. I would say roughly of the events that I've gone to, nothing happens. You literally are shouting in a room. I would say 50% actually unusual things happen, and there's kind of varying levels of like how probable it might be that it's paranormal. For instance, you might hear kind of creaks or bangs, and that could be other things, kind of like, you know, the building settling and other things. Whereas on the higher scale, I mean, I kid you not, there's a place called Eastbury Manor in London, really wonderful kind of Elizabethan style house, and there was a long gallery there, and we had a load of people in a circle, and we had some green lights on in banks on kind of wooden beams, and I literally said, if there's anyone there, can you show us a sign? And immediately one bank of green lights just went out. Now, that couldn't have been anybody flicking the switch, because I was right by the switchboard. I would have seen them and heard them, because it wasn't pitch black, it was dim green. And it wasn't the fuse, because I went onto the switchboard and I managed to turn it back on again. And the timing of it was extremely, extremely interesting. And they just went off and I had to switch them back on again. To me, that was pretty evidential for me personally. But yeah, what about yourself, Barrie? Have you come across anything that you feel is like bang on evidential?
Well, yeah, you know, I mean, there has been times when you're calling out and lights will go off, or, you know, torches might flicker or something, you know, and things like that. But that's like why I say I always get people using tools on an event, because there is nothing worse than people who've never worked in this field just standing around calling out and nothing happens, because it can be a very boring night, really, if you're not careful. So you've got to keep them entertained. You've got to get them doing activities. And, you know, one of the biggest things I'll always get people doing is table moving and getting it moving around the room, getting it to knock, tap, rap to questions, giving you answers. But certainly, you know, as you said, you know, in terms of calling out and suddenly you hear a door slam. And I remember doing... it was actually a friend of mine had bought a lovely old house in Nottingham. It was an old mansion, actually. And I remember we were doing a ghost hunt there, and we were in like the foyer area of the house, you know, in the entrance hall. And it was derelict, this house was. He bought it to refurbish it. And I remember we were calling out, and we was not being antagonising, but we knew we'd got a spirit, and we were trying to get them to do something. We were trying to get a reaction. And I remember, you know, we were really pushing them and calling out. And the next minute, this door on the top floor, away from any of us, you literally heard it open and then slam, as though somebody had got really annoyed with us, as though enough's enough, I'm not playing the game anymore. Yeah, you know, and you get that a lot. And you know, you also get things where, you know, you might get something thrown, you know, whatever it is, maybe a stone or trigger object, a marble. And we look for a lot of those sort of things where things have been moved. You know, trigger objects are great, aren't they? You set them up and suddenly you go back to them and it might have moved like 10 centimetres off of where you'd marked it. But yeah, like you said, you've got to consider things like, is the vibration, is the road traffic, has that probably done it? So as with any event, I'll always try and almost, I suppose, rule out in a nice way, rule out some of the things that I think it could be that's caused it, before we start saying, yeah, actually, we can't explain that. And, you know, this is what I like talking about to people. It's the bit that we can't explain, which is the bit that we're interested in, not the stuff that we can, because, you know, there could be a window open, there could be a door open, there could be somebody's, you know, not closed the door properly and suddenly it's just clicked shut. you know, all these sort of things we're aware of. You know, let's be honest, in our own homes, you know, I know when I go to bed at night, you know, my bedroom's on the top floor, but you can hear the stairs creaking because it's the heating system that starts cooling down.
Yeah.
Suddenly, you know, the stairs start cracking. Well, you know, a lot of people would go into almost spiritual mode and start saying, oh, somebody's walking upstairs. Well, you know, I know it isn't. I know it's just the heating. I mean, one of the best stories that I've got actually was I did an event at the Galleries of Justice in Nottingham, which was the old sort of law courts of Nottingham years ago, and it dates back to the 1200s. And I remember doing an event there, coming back home, actually coming to bed or going to bed, and the next thing I kept hearing the kettle boil downstairs, and I kept going downstairs, and every time I got downstairs it turned off, but every time I come back upstairs it turned on. So in the end, I actually physically took it off the stand and put it on the side because it just kept flicking on and off all night. And I kept thinking that obviously I brought somebody back with me or somebody's still trying to get my attention here. But, you know, I think in terms of public and what the public want to see something physical. You know, people like us that are into the paranormal, we know that energy changes in a room. We know that vibrations change. We can feel it changing. But people who have gone there to experience something want something physical to see or to touch.
They want that thrill, don't they?
They do, yeah, they
That's
do.
What they're paying for.
Yeah, you know, and I think sometimes, you know, I mean, I'll always say, you know, any publicity is publicity in terms of what we do. You know, it's great seeing TV programs about the paranormal, but everything doesn't happen in an hour's show. You know, You've got to appreciate that. You know, I've done some events and some televised shows where I've been sat there for hours on end thinking there is nothing that's going to happen in this room.
Yeah, well, Mark can tell you about that because he's done quite a few shows as well.
Yeah. And you can just tell, can't you?
Yeah. Mark.
Well, that's why, you know, I'm very jaded when it comes to especially the American paranormal shows because I've been on a couple of them, and unfortunately, the producers of most of these shows, they don't even believe in the paranormal. They don't care. They want ratings, and they have manufactured evidence, or they've flat out, you know, lied, manipulated things on shows to make it seem like things happen when they don't. Because who's going to watch a show when nothing happens? But that's, you know, as a paranormal researcher, you know, most times when we do an investigation, nothing happens. That doesn't make for great TV. So most of the time most of my experience is, they're faking things to amp up the tension and the excitement level.
You wanted to ask a question earlier, Mark.
Well, yeah, Barrie. I was just curious what type of mediumship that works best for you. I mean, there are a lot of psychic mediums who are clairaudient, clairsentient. Yeah. You know, they pick up things in different way. How do you get your information?
In terms of an event or in terms of private sittings?
In general. I mean, when you tell us a little bit when you first started to realize that you had these abilities, and how did they manifest for you?
Well, yeah, I mean, if I go right back, you know, if I go back to when I was a child, which is when I first started seeing spirit, and I'm talking there of my earliest sort of memories were probably maybe around 5, 6, 7, something like that. And I remember, you know, I used to lay in bed and I used to see them almost drifting down outside the window, waving at me. And I remember I used to sit there and think, how do them people get outside? You know, how are they managing to do that? And it became a regular occurrence, really. You know, I've always had that vision, you know, the sight, you know, and it's always been a great bonus to me, you know. And then I think over time, as I always teach people and talk to them, your abilities start developing in different ways. When I work with people and when I do workshops, I'll always get them doing a workshop, what I call working with the clairs. So what we'll do is we'll work with all the different sort of senses. So, you know, some of them we might get them working with the clair knowing, some of them we'll get them working with the clairvoyant. You know, you play around with it so much so that people realise what is their strongest sort of link. And I think with me, you know, spirit have developed me so much over time that it depends what spirit I'm working with. Some of them I might just hear, some of them I might see, some of them I might just sense. I think if I was going onto a paranormal event, I would certainly have to say most of it is just a gut feeling. You know, it's just that knowing, that clear knowing that something is there or something's following me. And that's because my mind's switched off in so many ways. And let's be honest, you know, when we're doing an event, one of the things we take off of people is mainly the sight a lot of the time because we put them in darkness. So I think, just jumping back and answering your question, I think for me, it purely depends on the spirit that I'm working with and how they want to come through and communicate with me, because they will develop whichever sense they think's better for them. And I've never really been one that says, no, I don't, this is how I work. I go with how spirit world want me to work and how they want me to open up a little bit.
So when you're doing the public events, what do you usually focus on?
Are we talking a demonstration?
Sure.
Right. If I'm doing a demonstration, I would focus on more like the clairvoyant side of things. That's where I'm comfortable with it, and that's what suits me.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And what about when you're using your abilities for kind of like ghost hunts and stuff? Does that vary then from the clairvoyance?
Massively, yeah, massively. And I would have to say it's probably more of what I always call the clair knowing, like the gut feeling side of thing that steps in straight away then, because you just know as soon as you walk into a room that there's something there, something's beginning to build up, but you can't physically explain it at that moment in time until it starts developing and working up something and turning into something.
What I was going to say, Barry, is have you seen a ghost?
I don't know, actually. Saying that, I honestly don't know. And you see, that's where I go into my spiel then about the difference between a ghost and a spirit.
Yeah, well, the ghost obviously is a recording, but the spirit yeah.
And because people will always, whenever they go to an event, they go, I want to see a ghost, I want to talk to a ghost. Well, you won't be able to talk to a ghost.
No.
Okay. But I think certainly, I remember when I used to run a lot of events in Nottingham, and especially at the Galleries of Justice, I used to have to lock up at night. And the Galleries of Justice goes down probably 4 or 5 levels, and there's all the condemned cells and the night cells and the prison cells and the courtyards and everything, you name it. And I remember, people that went with me used to laugh at me like mad, because I used to go down, lock up, and from the minute of locking up, I used to scream my head off till I got to the top of the stairs, because it was just the most, because I was in the dark, physically in the dark, and it was the most spookiest building I've ever run into.
Well, you frightened you.
Am I what?
You were frightened.
Oh God, I'm scared of the dark. Yeah.
Do you not bring a torch with you?
I am scared of the dark. Seriously.
Barry, did you not bring a torch with you?
No, that's the fun of it, isn't it? That's the fun of it. But I could tell you now, if I did see something, I'd probably throw the torch at it.
The interesting thing is that when people go along to ghost hunts and they have in their mind, I'd like to see a ghost, the question is, do they really? Because Ashley Ciberini, a friend of mine who runs ghost hunts and sometimes goes more
also who has been on this show.
Yeah, he's been a guest of this show, said that there was one particular time where we had a group of girls, and they were kind of like, typical bimbo type girls, and they were there to see a ghost, and they actually saw the image of a very old lady in Victorian clothing, and they absolutely shite themselves. So the question is, do people really want to see ghosts?
I don't think they do, and I think that's very similar to when people come to an event, isn't it? When they come to a mediumship demonstration, they all come with this thrill of wanting a message. But as soon as you go to some people, you see them clam up straight away, and it's, oh no, please don't let the secrets out. No, can I talk to you afterwards? No, I don't want you to release anything. And people are so scared of the unknown, I think, to be honest. I always have some classic rules. One of them was for ghost hunting, and it was, if a door's closed, it's closed for a reason. And if it is closed, push a woman through first. And in all my years of ghost hunting, it's never let me down. And people do seriously laugh at me. I'm not a small guy. I'm 6'5" tall. And I've been known to push people out of the way to get out of a room before. Seriously, but I think you're absolutely spot on there, Andrew, because I think people go with these great expectations that they want to be scared. But, again, I remember doing the Ragged School in London, in the East End of London once. And there was a guy there that got one of these sort of enhancing headsets on, with the earphones where you could turn the volume up. And I remember he was in the basement and his girlfriend was on the top floor. And suddenly, through this device, his nickname was called that nobody else knew. And straight away, all he did was take him off, throw him on the floor, and ran out of the room. That was it. And by the time we caught up with him, when he was stood outside the building, physically shaking, saying, I need to go home, I can't do this anymore. It was like, oh, right, okay. But, that's an individual's experience, isn't it? And I've got to be honest, I've had events like that where I've gone along and maybe walked around before and I've thought, something's not right here. Something's just walked through me, or, I've turned a corner and just felt this energy hit me almost. So, it purely depends on what people's interpretation of it is and what, like you say, what the reaction is really.
See, the device that was used, was that a spirit box by any chance?
No, it wasn't. It was one of the ear enhancers. It was basically a set of headphones with like a little sort of microphone device on it where you could turn the volume up and down.
I see.
And that's what he used. So basically, all he was hearing was the voices of other people around him, but obviously something else had come in and called out his nickname, and I can't remember what it was now, but we called out his nickname, and this guy was so petrified. So I remember we said to him, well, surely it was your girlfriend. He says, no, she was on the top floor.
See, I never get scared
Barrie?
at investigations.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say Mark wants to say something.
Well, I was just going to say and all the investigations I've done, I've never really gotten scared. I can be in a cemetery in the middle of the night by myself. I can be in a basement dark by myself. And you know what I'm afraid of? The living. That scares me a lot more than...
That's what Mum always used to say. It's not the dead that's scared. That's not the dead that's going to harm you, Irene. It's the living.
Yeah, where I was in New Jersey, if I was out in the middle of the cemetery, I'd keep my eyes open for not only for ghosts, but for skunks and for bears. Those skunks, bears, and drunks. And we did run into one once. We ran into this guy who had gotten drunk at his brother's grave, passed out, and when we came across him, he woke up belligerent and pulled a knife on us. And like, okay.
Wow.
You're joking.
No.
I had a spirit call me creepy once.
Well, you are, aren't you?
I know, but the thing is, it's like so ironic. It was actually just before Christmas, and a friend of mine brought along a spirit box, and we went to a ghost hunt in Malden, which is very good, by the way. I think it's on Facebook, Malden Ghost Hunt. And anyway, we were kind of like afterwards, we were kind of mooching around one of the old buildings. I think it's like the old library, which was a church at one point. And my friend turned this spirit box on. And I was dressed a little bit gothy, because kind of like sometimes if I'm doing a ghosty thing, I'll dress a bit black and a bit gothy. And one of the words that came through this spirit box, by the way, for people who don't know what a spirit box is, it sweeps through the airwaves, not picking up on any particular channels. And apparently the person who did it, who kind of created them, called Steve Cooper, if you want to find him on Facebook and buy one, he does sell them. Apparently it scans through the channels, but it shouldn't pick up on any radio stations or TV stations or CB radios. It shouldn't. So what it's picking up on, in theory, it's scanning through kind of like wavelengths, but kind of like of white noise, from what I can understand. He's very techy and very scientific, so he could explain it much better than me. But it's not supposed
I'm not
to
a big fan of them at all. I don't know about you, Barrie.
But this one word that came through was creepy. And I think it actually said my name. I think it said like Andy, and it's very robotic sounding for some reason. I don't know why that is, but it said like Andy, creepy. I just thought, that's ironic. You're a spirit and you're...
I prefer to have an AVP. Hear it with my own ears rather than any sort of gadget like that. Yeah. What do you like with the spirit boxes, Barrie? Do you believe that they work or what?
No, I've got to be honest. I fully agree with you on that, Irene, because I've never had anything that's come out of one that's really made me think, blimey, that's true. All I ever seem to hear is all this crackling noise, and then somebody will say, did you hear that? They said this word, and I think, no, I never heard that.
Yeah, it gives you a bloody headache, doesn't it?
Yeah, but that's the same as the ovulus for me. You see, the ovulus for me works very similar because, the one thing that people seem to forget is the ovulus, to get the words out, only has certain words programmed into it. So that's all you're going to get out of it.
Yeah.
And I think, so much of it, like with the voice box or the ghost box, whatever people want to call it nowadays, I normally call it the broken radio. But I think the only thing that you ever get is what you think you hear from it. And, as Andrew was saying, it's not meant to scan any.
Well, this is it. It's pareidolia of the ear holes. That's what I.
Here's my take on the spirit box, because the problem I have with the spirit box, and I own one, is the fact that it has an antenna to pick up AM or FM radio signals. The only way I would use one is if I was in an area that was getting no radio signals. Now, we have an opportunity coming up here in a few weeks that I'm going to be exploring deep inside a cave. And in that cave, there will be no radio signals. So I may use it and see if something comes through. And if any voices come through, I'll know it's not radio signals because they're not going to penetrate deep inside, several hundred feet inside of a cave.
Well, that's the interesting thing about it, because Mark is going down the Cave of the Winds, right, in Colorado, which is really big cave system. If he does get anything on it, then it proves to us that it works. Yeah. If it's silent all the time, like a mobile phone or anything like that, which won't work down there, then obviously, Yeah,
but see, for me, and I'll make this point and I'll let you go, Barry. For me, what impresses me the most is just regular, good old-fashioned EVP, because on an audio recorder,
or AVP.
Well, AVP is great too, but as long as you're able to record it, to have that backup copy. I've heard voices, I've heard animal noises and other things. That's great. But even when you don't hear it and you get a crystal clear voice. Now, I'm not talking about this crap that most of the shows play where you hear some garbled thing and they go, oh, do you hear what the guy said? Yeah, he said you're going to die. I heard blah, 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 blah. So, that it doesn't fly for me. If it is not Class A, if you can't understand, fully discern it as being human speech, and, if you can't at least hear a word or two that's in it, I don't even make it evidence, because who knows what's causing that distortion to come through. If it's a clear response and you get voices and there's nobody talking at the time, that's pretty cool. If you get it where an intelligent response to a question that you didn't hear at the time, that's even better. But, for me,
I have to say that the spirit boxes that I've listened to, most of it is crap, but some of it is quite not legible, audible, and in response to intelligent questions. I have experienced that personally. And
you know what? That's the whole thing is we need more of that type of backup. And when you hear them through the spirit box, it's not just being able to hear it. You also have to have something recording it too, to play back and analyze. Because if you hear it and you didn't record it, it's not evidence. It's just something maybe cool that happened, but you can't back it up and analyze it. Because sometimes, again, when something happens, your ears might fool you. You play it back and listen to it, you might have better say, oh, wait, I know what happened here, and so did this. It's doing the due diligence to go through the evidence and make sure you really have what you think you have.
Yeah, and you know what, Mark, I fully agree with you. I'm certainly on your team here with this, because I think anything like EVP, brilliant. Love EVP. And I agree with you, Irene. From our perspective as a medium, as a paranormal investigator, the things that we see and feel, the difficulty nowadays is that so many pieces of equipment can be interfered with by outside influences, whatever that is, wavelengths, and as Andrew was just saying, in terms of the spirit box, you hear it far too often where suddenly you'll start getting, the local radio station or the local taxi company or the pizza delivery company suddenly coming through it. And I know they say that shouldn't happen, but it does. It's like if somebody's got a mobile phone on and they stood next to somebody with an EMF meter, it'll detect it, it'll pick it up straight away. Yeah. And that's where I think so much of it nowadays needs to be done in probably more of controlled environments. And let's be honest, the public events that we all do are really a little bit of, I always say to people, this is a taster to get you into the ghost hunting side, because once you get into it, it's a totally different minefield. All of us would do a ghost hunt very different to how we would do if it was on a public event. If we did one privately, we would sit, we'd be quiet, you wouldn't shuffle, you'd get comfortable, you'd sit there for a good hour without saying anything, whereas when you've got a member of public and you walk into a room and within 5 minutes they're going, oh, well, nothing's happening, this is a waste of time, I've wasted my money on this. It's a totally different environment, isn't it? And I think, somebody mentioned a few minutes ago about, intelligence. That's what we try and demonstrate. That's what we're trying to prove, is that the spirit world have an element of intelligence and are able to properly communicate with us, not grunt and not just moan and groan. We want something that's physically feasible, that somebody can say, blimey, yeah, we all heard that. We all heard him call the name Charlie and that he was 67 or whatever. And that's where I think we're going nowadays with spiritual proof. People want proper proof that cannot be faltered, that people can, properly audible hear it. We want to know it properly, not just guess it.
But part of what we run into with the public and science in general is because most of the tools that we use we're taking devices that were devised for a completely different purpose and trying to incorporate it into ghost hunting. You know, everything from EMF meters to digital recorders to like Xbox Kinect 3D mapping systems. You know, they're all made for something else. We're trying to use these tools to measure paranormal activity. Yet the scientific community won't even touch it. They think it's bunk and they dismiss it and they won't even take it seriously. And yet we have captured some really interesting phenomenon that can't be explained. But the trick with paranormal activity is, as you mentioned earlier, Barrie, it does not perform on cue. And science won't look at anything if it cannot be replicated in a laboratory environment.
It's a little bit like, and I agree with you on that, Mark. It's like when people want to take pictures and they'll come up with one picture and say, "Oh, look at this! Did you see this? You know, I've caught something." And I'll say, "Can't do that. What you've got to do is take a chain of pictures, consecutive pictures, where you can see that there was nothing there. Then it starts developing. Then something else comes in. Then it starts building up. And then suddenly it's gone." You can't just have it where, because, you know, I remember years ago, I'm sure we all can, where you used to get double exposures on a picture where it was almost a picture over a picture.
Yep.
You know, and that happened, didn't it? Because technology wasn't good in them days. But it's funny enough now, because people seem to be reverting back to the older technology, because what they're saying is the modern sort of digital cameras are just too sensitive because they pick up on every little speck of dust that suddenly people say are orbs. And what they're reverting back to is some of the older equipment of like the old-fashioned sort of tape recorders, you know, everything that goes back so that there's not this interference anymore. And I think it's difficult. You know, you mentioned it, Mark, that a lot of the equipment we've got isn't for ghost hunting at all. Majority of it was picking up electrical frequencies, vibrations, noises, you know, and we're trying to say, well, this is a really good piece of equipment because it does this for us. But it wasn't meant to do that in the first place. Right.
And, you know, and that's not to say that it can't be useful. I mean, tracking fluctuations in the ambient electromagnetic field within a location has proven to be useful, because when you're getting some of these EMF spikes that seem to come out of nowhere and then vanish, especially in a location where there's no electricity. But then again, I've also used it in places where people are saying, "Oh, I keep going down to the basement. I keep feeling like I'm being watched and this energy, and I just feel all icky." And then you go down and there's the junction box right there, and it's throwing off like 150 milligauss. Then, you know, there's your culprit, because the person is probably being sensitive, overly sensitive to high levels of EMF. So it could be used to both debunk certain types of paranormal activity and also track other types of paranormal activity.
But you see, this is the difference, though, Mark, isn't it? Because if again, I'll refer to us four, if we went into a proper building to do a proper investigation, we would do a pre-walk round. We'd say, well, don't go in that room because we know that, you know, the electricity board's in there and we know it's buzzing away. You know, don't go in this room here because we know that there's a door that doesn't close properly and it just keeps banging. Whereas on a public event, people don't seem to do that anymore. All they want to do is get as many people into a building as they can and let them sometimes run riot in buildings. You know, and there's no organisation to it anymore. And I know of companies that I used to work with who actually don't have mediums on events anymore. All it is, they let people just do their own thing. You know, some of these people have got no idea what they're doing. You know, they're letting them run around with Ouija boards and with gadgets and tools. And, you know, these people, like you said, they're running up to basically light fittings or sockets and going, "Oh, look, my EMF meter's going off." Well, yeah, it will do. It will do. But nobody's telling them why.
When you're not trained and you don't know what you're doing, and, you know, again, here in America, we've had, in the last 10 or 12 years, such a glut of paranormal groups popping up. And they pop up for two reasons. One is because, they've watched too many episodes of Ghost Hunters, and they go, "I can go do that." And they get a bunch of people together, and they call themselves a paranormal group, and then they go to people's houses saying, "We're going to help you." And they have no idea what they're doing. Or they're forming in the hopes that they too can get their own show and become famous, and nobody is taking the actual research part of it seriously. It's kind of why I stopped going to the paranormal conventions that we have so many of over here, because Yet I feel that most of the investigators, even these so-called para-celebrities, is the term they use, they're famous for appearing on a ghost show or doing whatever, and yet the tactics that they're using, the investigation techniques, are so basic, it's like they're still in kindergarten. And they haven't really done the work to realize that what is going on is far more strange and interesting than we really know.
It's funny, Mark, because you just mentioned something there that actually I wanted to pick up on, and that was the paranormal groups that not only over there, but over here is setting up. And everywhere you go, everybody's part of a paranormal group. And for me, it's the damage what they're doing in terms of going into people's private homes that are experiencing things, and the things that they're leaving them with and telling them to do, or things that they're opening up, or things that they're putting into people's minds is absolutely horrendous. And the amount of calls that I get where somebody will say, I called a medium in last week and they were telling my house is possessed and that I need to get out. Well, why would you do that? Why do you physically feel the need to tell somebody that? And I think, again, it goes on to what we were talking about a few minutes ago about training, doesn't it? People have got to understand what we do. It's not all about the TV. It's not about getting your face into the public limelight all the time. The only thing I love about it is that I try and prove to people that actually we are intelligent people and that we do know what we're on about. We want to prove to people that there is an afterlife, but we're not all going to run around screaming and shouting, saying that every little noise or tap is a paranormal activity and suddenly somebody's going to come and get us out of the wall. We want to prove to them that we're professional people and that we can do things properly. And actually there is things that do happen that we would turn around and say, well, actually, no, sorry, that's not paranormal. But there are too many people out there that do that. There's too many people out there that run around. Every building's possessed. I remember working with a medium many, many years ago that I refused to work with. And every building we went into, we got a demonic monk. And I mean, number one, you've got a total clash of issues there for a start. You've got a monk that's very religious with somebody that's not religious and that's a demon. It doesn't make sense to me.
But then again, Barry, a lot of people that call for help from people like me, or when I used to do it and everything, all they wanted was a demon.
Yes. Yeah.
They had to have the demon. They had to have the best, the biggest one.
Yeah. That is something Irene and I have talked about ad nauseum. Again, here in the U.S., and it seems like I constantly put down my own country, but I'm sorry. Everybody over here has a freaking demon. And I've been called out on so many cases. People go, there's something demonic in my house. And I get in, and after I investigate a little while, I go, yeah, okay, you've watched one too many ghost shows. There's nothing there, and yet everyone's convinced it's the next big thing: demons. And
they're not like it so much over here as what they are in America. I've worked both countries, and America, everyone's a demon. Everyone's got to have a demon, but here they do like their spirits.
There's another possibility, though. If that's what they're seeking and that's what they think it is and that's what they're looking for, I wonder if they might be drawing that kind of energy into them.
Yeah, some do. Yeah, some do.
But I disagree with that because I don't think people would understand what they were asking for a lot of the time.
I don't know. Some people that are into all the bad stuff and one thing or another, they are trying to attract bad to them. It doesn't mean to say it's a demon.
Yeah.
It's an energy, but it's a negative type of energy.
But I think it's, again, picking up on what you said to Mark, and well done, Mark, for saying what you said about it, because this is what I find from a lot of the shows that I do in America, the radio shows, is that everything's demonic. And I always say, no, it's not. It's not actually. How do you know it's not just your dad that's coming back to give a knock on the wall to say, I'm letting you know that I'm here, look, that's all I'm doing. And I do a lot of readings on some of the radio stations in America, little snippets of readings for people. And they're almost shocked when you go down a route of saying, oh, well, actually, I've got your loved one here. And they're trying to say this about you and they're telling me this about you. And this is what happened to them. And it's almost like, oh, right, so it's not demonic then. No, it's not. This is what I'm telling you. And I think it's that whole perception. But I think a lot of that, again, comes from televisation, as Mark was saying. It's what we're portraying people to believe, and that we're trying to force it onto them. Let's be honest. How many nice films are there out there about spiritual activity?
I was just going to say that there isn't any nice films out there.
No.
Horror films are so popular now, and God, I haven't seen a good horror film in 30 years. It's so popular. People want to be scared. They want to be spooked and jump at things that they don't understand. And that's part of the problem with the culture, especially in America, when you're dealing with people who want to be scared. When most of this activity, when it happens around me, I'm not scared. I'm just fascinated by it. I want to look into it and find out, why is this happening? What's going on? For me, it's more of a trying to understand the larger reality that we live in and how strange it really is. But other people, they want spooks. They want to be scared. They want that little rush of adrenaline when something happens to them.
That's what I was going to say, Barry. Talking about all this, have you ever picked up any negative attachment?
I've got to be honest and say, and I am saying this honestly.
Or had a psychic attack?
No, I've got to say no, I haven't, because especially from a psychic attack, I would never allow it to happen to me. All right, and I have another belief that the people that I work with in the spirit world, whoever that is, whether it be my mother, my guides, whoever you want to call them, I would hope they'd never allow anything like that to happen to me anyway. I think, just jumping back to your other question about negativity or picking up negative spirit. The funny thing is, when I do an event, and I'll always talk to people about, the word evil, for instance, because it's like, oh, well, we're going to see any evil spirits. And I say, well, what do you mean by the word evil? Because let's be honest, there's a lot of people down here that are negative. There's a lot of people down here that haven't got nice energy. But would you brand them as being evil or anything like that? No, I certainly wouldn't. My grandfather was a miserable man, most miserablest man you could ever wish to meet. He really got no sense of humour at all. But he wasn't an evil man. He was just a miserable man.
I would slightly disagree. Jimmy Savile, John Wayne Gacy, Fred West.
But again, I think it's that perception that people want to go away from an event, whatever you want to call it, to say, oh, yeah, we've had something really negative tonight. It wasn't nice. Barrie, Andrew, Mark, Irene, they've all told me I've got to tell them to go away and leave me alone. It's like, well, no, actually, it might be your dad just coming through to let you know that he's giving you a message.
That's true. That's what I used to say to him. How do you know it isn't your old granny?
Yeah. But, and I think it is that perception, Irene, of the wording, isn't it, for a lot of people? Is, again, I always talk about the word evil, because I always say, well, wait a minute, the church gave the word evil out, really, or the religion gave the word evil out because they wanted people to go in another direction. It's no different to me saying, if you go through the left door, you're going into the good light. If you go to the right door, you're going to the bad light. Well, which door do you want to pick?
Yeah.
Well, something that another concept we've discussed on a number of occasions is the idea that some of these negative entities, or what people perceive to be negative entities, you brought up a good point, are they really evil? If you have a low-level type of entity, maybe a thought form entity, that is formed out of negative energy, negative emotions, negative intent, and what does this thing need to keep surviving, keep going, or getting stronger? More negative energy, more negative emotions and intent. So I kind of look at, and again, this is not all of them, this is just only a few of them. I look at them more as like a parasite, like a spiritual mosquito or a leech, that, they'll attach themselves to somebody and they cause negative situations for the person to feel negative emotions and whatnot, not for evil intent, but it's just creating that energy source, that food source that they need to survive. What do you think of something like that?
It needs to be fed, doesn't it? And I agree with that. I think there's that element there of it. I always say to people, like attracts like. Mm-hmm. So if somebody's in a very sort of depressing stage or a down and out phase, whatever you want to call it, that's what they're going to attract to them. And that's not only in the spiritual realms, that's also in physical life a lot of the time. And I think, that's where I'll always try and get people looking at how they react. What sort of things do you want? And I can't remember who said it earlier, but I think it might have been you, Andrew, saying, when people go to an event and say, oh, yeah, I really want to see a ghost or I want to see a spirit. And you think, if you really did, you'd probably you'd never live it down. You'd remember it for the rest of your days, and probably not in a good way. You've got to also remember that there's a almost like a health point of view here, what we have to consider with people, because we have to consider the impact on people's mental states and states of mind. And I've had it, and I'm sure we all have. I've had clients ring up in the middle of the night, 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning. You can tell they obviously been on a lot of sherry for the evening. And they're ringing up saying, oh, everything's happening in my house. There's all these doors banging and everything's banging around. And then funnily enough, the next day when you ring them up, they don't even remember calling you. And it is, you've got to remember people's states. Now, and this makes me jump back to, again, what we were saying about paranormal groups, because paranormal groups are going to somebody's house, but they won't consider how is somebody feeling? What's the health condition like? Is that person... have they got any serious health problems? What medication are they on? And they're sort of things that, for us as professionals,
are they psychotic
straight away?
Are they suffering from psychosis? And
Exactly.
You know what? I've had that happen.
Yeah.
I used to have a nurse on my team, and of course, anybody that we took on, they would have to fill out an extensive form with their medication and everything. And she was able to judge, and sometimes she talked to friends in the hospital, doctor friends of hers, and she realised that these people weren't either taking the medication correctly or they were taking too much or not enough. And she used to come back and suggest that they go back to their doctor and have their medication reviewed.
Yeah. But that's another good point, isn't it? When as mediums we're working on a stage or a platform and we're giving messages to people about health or health conditions or medication, we have to be very careful what we say. And the first thing I'll always say to them is, look, I'm not a doctor. I'm not telling you your medication's wrong, but what's coming through to me is this. Okay. And you've got to be so careful not to put, as I always look at it, and Mark will fully understand this over in the US, you've got to be careful not to set yourself up for a claim scenario, because people will hold it against you. Why is it, every show that we do, we have to announce that it's for entertainment purposes only? It's all protecting everybody all the time, isn't it?
That's right.
Even when we do
the purposes only thing was a Brussels mandate. That was an EU stipulation.
Yep.
Yeah.
I tell you what, I can't stand it when I hear that a medium has told somebody else that they're either going to die or someone close to them is on their way out and going to be dead within a couple of days. I cannot stand that.
No.
You just don't do that.
Because it doesn't help anything. It doesn't help anyone.
That person is going to go round wrapped in cotton wool or wrapping that other person round it in cotton wool. And they're going to have no life.
Yeah.
It's absolutely bloody ridiculous. You don't get involved to that point.
No. And that's a great point, because, again, I don't think the spirit world would ever give you that information. Surely they wouldn't. I would hope not, because I wouldn't have any respect if they did.
I had one person once who was a friend of mine, and his mother was very, very ill in hospital, and he said to me, Irene, he said, is my mum going to die? And I said, I'm not God, I can't tell you.
Yeah.
Someday.
Well, the technical answer to that is yes, but when is the next question?
Oh, well, I wouldn't say that to him.
We've all got a ticket out of here.
Well, I had a reading. I was at a metaphysical fair earlier in the summer, and I had a reading with this one woman who, what she had come through, and it wasn't a mediumship reading. It's not like she was channeling anybody, but what she had come through for me was, and she actually looked upset giving me the information. She's saying that there is going to be a decision that needs to be made, and the outcome of that is going to have dire consequences. Now, that's fairly generic, and I wasn't quite sure of that. And I go, okay. And she said a couple other things. She kind of hit the point. A month later, my identical twin brother dropped dead of a heart attack. And what made me think about her reading was he was actually having upper back pains that morning, went to the emergency room, and he waited there an hour and nobody saw him, and then the pain subsided, so he left and went to work. And he worked all day with these pains and severe heartburn, and that night on his way home, that's when it finally hit him and he dropped dead. And if he would have stayed at the hospital and not gotten inpatient, he would be alive today. And that made me instantly think of what this woman said. Now, some people could say, well, maybe that was even too much information, something so negative. But at the same time, I think it was done in such a way that, she kept it generic enough that it's still open to interpretation, but I think she saw it.
Yeah. Don't you think there's... I agree with that. And don't you think there's an issue nowadays, though, that as soon as somebody... how many mediums are there out there nowadays? Somebody picks up a pack of cards from the local shop and lo and behold, suddenly they're a medium.
Yeah.
Nobody goes through any sort of formal training anymore. I mean, I was on the East Midlands Education Board. I was on the SNU. I've helped save local churches by being on the committee. I was on the SNU East Midlands Paranormal team. The people used to ring me up when they got paranormal issues or things that they didn't understand. And I just think, why don't people go down this route anymore? And it was funny because I remember the other week speaking to somebody at an event, and they was talking to me about they got this degree in something to do with angels, and I thought, where do you get a degree to do with angels? Is this just something that somebody's created, or is this a proper sort of qualification? And I think there's so many people out there nowadays that, as I say, just go to one group, one circle, one paranormal event, and suddenly that's what they're going to do for the rest of their life. They think what we do is easy.
No.
I get very frustrated with what I do because I think a lot of the time I'm not a medium. I'm probably more of a counsellor to people. I'm trying to help them through a situation. I'm trying to help them grieve. I'm trying to help them, move on to the next job because they're scared to take that next step. And that's where I get very frustrated for myself because I think, actually, all I want to do is be a medium. I want to be able to give messages from loved ones. That's what I want to do. But, people that come to see me obviously have other ideas of what I should be doing in terms of giving messages from the other side.
Right. Barrie, we actually have to go to break. When we come back, let's pick that up. And I got a great question about mediumship to lead into that, to talk about that. So everyone, don't go away. We're talking with Barrie John, and we'll be right back after these messages.
I'm Sonia Brose, Catholic charismatic and spiritual warrior who has spent years fighting negative forces. My new book, The Curse of El Diablo, has just been published by Glennet Ty. The Curse of El Diablo is the true story of my journey to northern Mexico to help a family tormented by an evil sorcerer skilled in the arts of brujeria. But I soon found myself in a dangerous struggle as I battled the evil forces thrown at me by this brujo, and it was only my faith in God that protected me from the onslaught. The Curse of El Diablo is an epic story of a struggle between the forces of good and evil and the triumph of faith over darkness. The Curse of El Diablo is now available in softcover and ebook format on Amazon.com and on GlanetTie.com.
Have you ever wanted to visit the south of Italy? Amalfi, Ravello, Positano, Sorrento, places of immense beauty on the Amalfitana coast. Nearby Vesuvius stands proud against the sky, shadowing the ancient Roman ruins of Pompeii. In the midst of all this beauty lies the picturesque hillside village of Pontoni that dates back to the Middle Ages. Stay in Pontoni, in the self-catering apartments of Il Petrale, the beautiful casa belonging to Carmiana Respoli, who will warmly welcome you when you arrive. Il Petrale, a haven of peace in the heart of this magnificent place called Pontoni. For more information, email us at carminerispoli@email.it. That's Carmine Rispoli, CarmineRispoli @email.it.
Good evening, Agent 47. It has come to our attention, through the highest intelligence sources, that Irene Allen Block has published her novel, The Psychic Spy. Our sources tell us that The Psychic Spy is a riveting thriller about Eileen Evans, a beautiful young psychic who is recruited by British intelligence during the Cold War to participate in their top-secret remote viewing spy program. Eileen soon finds herself plunged deeper into the darkest heart of the intelligence community as she is ultimately trained as a spy and a psychic assassin. Nick Redfern says The Psychic Spy is filled with adventure, intrigue, and shadowy characters, and as Irene Allen Block shows, the mind is a mysterious and dangerous tool. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to immediately purchase a copy of The Psychic Spy by Irene Allen Block, available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and GlanetTie.com. This tape will self-destruct in 1 second.
Imagine no longer being tied down to your computer, but having the freedom to take live talk radio with you anywhere you go. TalkStream Live introduces our first ever iPhone application. The talk shows you follow now follow you, and your iPhone is now the fastest and easiest way to stay connected to the best talk radio on the internet. Listen to live talk shows 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. TalkStream Live, now available in the iTunes App Store.
Hello folks, you're listening to Paranormal UK Radio, and I'm here with three wonderful people, Irene Allen Block, Mark Johnson, and our guest Barrie John. Barrie, this is a question I always ask to kind of mediums and psychics and various guests because it's quite a hot topic for me. What's your stance on UFOs and ETs, and have you seen anything of that ilk at all?
Bloody, this is funny. I did a radio show about this the other week. Do you know, I've got to say, there's a lot of things out there that I can't explain, and I'll say me first of all. And I do believe that there probably is afterlife out there and other life and other forms. You know, let's be honest, we all talk to a spirit world that is somewhere in the ether, somewhere, and none of us know where. So I'm sure that there is something either, you know, living on other planets or living in some other galaxy or something that pay a visit. And I think there's too many sort of experiences that people have had for us just to be able to rule it out. I mean, you know, when I look at, you know, people have you know, been talking to aliens, people have been collected by aliens, you know, all those sort of things. And I know you could argue and say, well, how much of it is actually true? But I think, okay, there's got to be something in it, because there really is a lot of this going on nowadays where people keep seeing these lights in the sky, and maybe it is just a plane, maybe it isn't, you know. But I think everything's open to interpretation. So I would say, certainly, Andrew, I would never, ever rule it out. But what I'd say is that for me, physically, I've never seen any physical evidence myself, but I'm open to it. I'm open to people proving me wrong.
Well, it's selfish to think that we're the only planet with anyone living on it. Let's face it. Mark, you wanted to ask a question.
Well, I'll ask my other question in a minute since we're on this topic here. Well, you know, there are cases that I've worked with where I've worked with people who are alien contactees, abductees, experiencers, pick your moniker. And what's interesting to me is that so many of these people have a combination of activity. Not only are they having whatever seems like, you know, this UFO or alien experience, but then these same people also experience various types of ghost-like activity, paranormal activity, from poltergeist activity to seeing spirits to hearing voices to hearing all this other stuff. And it seems to me that there's more of an overlap with this type of phenomenon than most people think. I mean, I know ghost hunters who laugh at the idea of UFOs and vice versa. You know, ufologists who think ghosts are bunk. But there's actually, this is where we've kind of shifted our view, and Irene and I, with our research, is we're looking at a little more all-encompassing, because I think there's more of an overlap than people think. And Irene, to answer your question about, you know, yeah, it's foolish to think that we're the only planet with life, and saying, my response to that is, who's to say that we're talking about just other planets? You know, we could be talking about other dimensions, other realities, overlapping with ours.
Well, we've talked about that, Mark.
A mouthful of crisps.
but you know, I mean, let's be honest. In what we do in terms of the, you know, whatever you want to call it, phenomena, paranormal, you know, all of this, you know, it's good that we can all actually delve into it and talk about different experiences, but also not only different experiences, we're not being narrow-minded to say, well, actually, this is the only view there is. And I think it's so important that, you know, we do look at all these other planets out there and places and things, and hopefully one day, who knows, you know, there might be a group of us living on Mars, for instance, you know, or somewhere out there. And I think it's important that we don't rule things out. I think we've got to keep that open mind.
Sure. The other question I wanted to ask you, Barrie, as a medium bringing messages in from the other side, I need a little help here. And I'm going to throw out a scenario that I've experienced and some of my opinions, and I'd like to hear your response to it. I have gone to a few so-called mediums in my day. One, this lady I just saw last week, and I usually leave completely unimpressed because usually what comes through is extremely generic. And I look for clues. If I usually try to keep my mouth shut, but if I give any kind of confirmation on something, I notice that they kind of run with that a little bit.
Yeah.
And, you know, this last woman I saw who actually she doesn't advertise, doesn't have a shop, does it out of her home, and she said she just likes to help people. Well, throughout this process, the main person that supposedly came through was my father. And yet I'm listening to what she's saying and what supposedly my father is telling me, and I felt no connection whatsoever. I'm going, that's not my father. It's some of the way things he's saying is not him. And again, it was generic, and I just felt like, I didn't think she was lying, but I don't think that she is actually picking up who she thinks she's picking up. And what is to prevent... And from your experience and what you feel, and I understand this is all personal for everybody who does this, how do you know that you are in contact with the right person and it's not somebody else coming in and impersonating it?
Right, a couple of things there, and I think a really good point, and I like the way you picked that up, is for me, I would have to do it through almost clarification, and I don't mean that in terms of asking you for the answers. That would be, I would give you as much information or evidence as I possibly could. So whatever it was, I'd want to describe your dad. I'd want to tell you what he looked like, what happened to him, what his health was like, what took him over to the spirit world, who he's met in the spirit world, what names he's given me, what dates he's given me. And I'd probably give you all that before I even turn around to you and say, Mark, do you understand that? Okay. And that isn't for you then to turn around to me and say, well, yeah, actually, no, his name weren't George, it was Martin and blah, blah. I'm not interested in any of that. You know, I'm just interested in you basically saying, yes, I understand it. And if you don't, then I've got something wrong somewhere. Okay. But also from a mediumistic point of view, when you're working and once you're going through a training process, you have to be able to understand when the energy starts changing, because it will change. As soon as you open up a doorway to the other world, you don't just get Mark's dad come through. What you might get is Mark's grand come through, Mark's granddad come through, Mark's brother will come through. You know, somebody who used to live next door to him is going to suddenly come through. And lo and behold, you've got all these people that you've got to somehow either control, or you've got to put them into a little pigeonhole somewhere and say, just wait a minute. You know, and it is difficult. It's not easy. And it is, I understand what you say, because I see a lot of it, and I've had readings. And I mean, when I have a reading, I never tell them my proper name for a start. I'll always go under a pseudonym name. But, you know, there's a lot of people out there that are face reading mediums, for instance. All they want to do is sit across from you and look at the expression on your face. You know, when people come to me for a reading, if they come to my home, which is, you know, very rare nowadays, so I don't do many from home. But if they do, I always sit in a chair that doesn't even look against the sofa that they sit on. It actually looks out of the window. You know, so I'm looking in totally the opposite direction, and all I want from this person is either a yes or a no. I don't want to know the whole life story. I don't want somebody to suddenly come into my consultation room and sit down and, you know, start saying, right, well, I want to talk to my mum, and my mum died of this, and my mum was 5'8" tall, and she got blonde hair. You know, she's buried next to my granddad. I'm really not interested in any of that. I don't want to know any of that. I want to make my own sort of interpretation up of what I'm getting through. And I think also it's that matter of, you know, you've got to try and give somebody enough evidence or enough information for them to go away and say, my God, yeah, that was my dad. Everything that he's told me was spot on. What he bought me for my birthday, the Christmas card that he left me, all those individual little bits of information. And it is about proving, it's about proof, but proving life after death. Not just saying to you, yes, Mark, I've got your dad here and he's saying he's proud of you. It means absolutely nothing to you. Because I'm sure 90% of dads in the spirit world would have come through when they was here and said to their children, yeah, I'm proud of you. So it's a very difficult life, and you've got to be able to provide proof and provide physical information that somebody can take away with them. And even if they have to investigate it, which I've had before, where I've given somebody something and they'll go away and think, they'll say to you, I don't understand that at all. And then they'll go away and suddenly email me and say, yeah, I spoke to my mum or my grandma or whatever, and yeah, you're absolutely spot on with the information you gave me, and yeah, so-and-so was her brother, and, Marjorie was a sister, but things that people didn't know. I mean, the classic ones that I get from some people when they come to see me is they'll go, I've not lost anybody in my family. And I think, well, why have you come to see me then? What can I help you with if you've not lost anybody close enough to you? So it's difficult. It's difficult from a medium's perspective because you've got to be able to provide information that, as I say, is provable, that's evidential, that can give somebody something to either take away to look at, or suddenly it just clicks a light in the mind and they think, yeah, there we go, bang, straight away. Or, you've got to stop yourself being guided by somebody into exactly what they want, because some people will do that. And I mean, I've had it before where I've done a reading for somebody and might have spent an hour on them. And suddenly, you say, right, is that okay? Is everything all right for you? Is there anything you want to ask me? And they'll go, oh yeah, but I didn't want to speak to any of them people you brought through. I just wanted to speak to, my ex-partner who's passed to the spirit world. And you think, well, all that information I've given you, then are you saying it's not correct? Are you saying it was right, but it wasn't really what you wanted? And I think it's all about people's expectations as well, isn't it? Sorry, have I gone off on a tangent there with that?
Well, you know what? I think part of the problem with doing this type of work for people is, unfortunately, you have to deal with people. And let's face it, so many of them come in with preconceived notions of what to expect, or they watch too many TV shows, or they really don't understand the phenomena. And then they come in and they'll waste your time, or they come in with ridiculous questions, or not, totally unrealistic expectations.
Yeah.
Well, I had one of them once. Somebody that watched too much television. They came in and asked me for the lottery numbers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I said, well, if I could tell you the lottery numbers, I'll be a rich person.
But they do, though. That's
chucked them out.
Yeah, but that's what people think, don't they? They think, we can give them the impossible at times. People, the amount of people that ask me, I've lost a piece of jewellery. Can you tell me where it is?
Yeah.
Well, when did you last have it?
That's it. Leave it alone. It'll come home.
Yeah.
Did you look under the bloody couch where you were sitting?
Well, exactly. But I think you just said it right there, Mark. The problem is we're mixing it with people that don't fully understand what we do. Going back to the paranormal again, people don't understand what we're actually trying to achieve, and they come in with their own perceptions of what we should do or what they're expecting to get from it. I mean, the amount of people that come to see me and want to know if they're going to get married, and the first question I always say to them is, do you want to get married? Because if you don't want to get married, then you're not going to get married. This isn't a mediumistic question. This is a common life human being problem.
It's very much a kind of, I suppose, some mediums and psychics are almost taking the role of therapists in a way, kind of like psychic therapy. For some people.
They are to a degree. They really are to a degree.
Well, this is what I said a few minutes ago, wasn't it? About, for me, it's difficult because you move between being a medium and being a counsellor.
Mm. Yeah,
and you
definitely.
do. It happens all the time. You have to know when to draw the line and when to cut that line off and say, sorry, from a mediumistic point of view, I can't help you anymore.
No, well, I done it for many, many, many years, and I don't do it anymore.
Well, do you also have problems with the repeaters? I mean, I know people who so rely on their mediums or their psychics that they go make appointments once a week, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. And it's always
the same person who gets to know them very well.
Yeah.
And then they know what they're looking for. And they give them the answers.
But that's bad
That
on
is
the
bad.
medium for a start, because if that was me, and Irene, I'll use you an example, and you're saying, can I book in every 12 o'clock on a Friday, please, for the next 12 months? Number one, I'd say to you, yeah, great, because you can pay me for it. But number two, I'd turn around and say, no, you can't, because there is nothing that I can physically tell you every week, because what you're doing then is you're actually living your life by what I'm telling you, which isn't what I want you to do. That's impossible.
It just becomes an obsession with people.
Yeah. Well, I've got, even me, I've got friends, close friends, who are, every month they've got to go and see a different medium all the time. And these mediums are all brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And then sometimes, I think, I'll tell you what, I'm going to go and see one just out of curiosity. And I'll go and, I'll ring them up and they'll say, weren't they good? And I'll say, no, actually, they weren't. They were rubbish.
Yeah.
They didn't give me any proof, any information. I knew he was around me and they clearly didn't. And that's not me trying to prove them wrong or diss anybody. I would never, ever do that. But, again, I know I keep saying this. It goes back to what we were saying before, doesn't it? About suddenly everybody's an excellent medium out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
See, I've had,
and then mediums get used. They get used. Yeah. The reason I gave it up, because I ended up being, I thought I was being invited to drinks at a friend's house, and when I got there, she'd already had a dinner party with other people, and I was the after dinner entertainment.
Oh no, that's cruel.
Yeah, that was cruel, and from that day on, I never done it again.
No, that's cruel.
I never done it again.
And it's almost like you're a performing monkey, isn't it?
Yeah.
Again, I get it.
I got there and it's come on. All the women are grabbing hold of me. Come on, Irene, come in here and do your thing. That was the words. Do your thing.
Yeah. But I get, you get this all the time. I get it, where you'll go to somebody's house and they'll go, Barry's a medium, and they'll go, what, really? Oh, well, who's with me now then?
Yeah.
And you think, give me a break. Do you know what I mean?
That's it. You just,
Yeah.
I think you go in there just for an evening out, and that's it.
Yeah.
No. I stopped it. 15 years ago, I suppose. Maybe a bit longer, and then went into helping people in other ways. The paranormal problems and one thing or another. But what I want to ask you, if we can just get off subject for a minute, what did it feel like doing Children in Need?
Oh, fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah,
there was I did it at Newark Castle, which is a really old building, near me. An old building, an old castle. And it was fantastic because I love giving something back. I always do. And I always have done in terms of charity events. I'll help anybody out, but it was just fantastic. There was a group of us. It was a little bit of fun. We did a little bit of table tipping. We did a little bit of psychic circle. A Ouija board. We had a good old giggle. We had some people fell asleep, but it was good fun. It really was, and it was nice being able to raise the money. And I think in the end we raised something like £7,000 actually, just by the local people of the village, really. And it was fantastic. And I think what we do, people don't see what we do outside of being a medium. They don't see the support that we give to other people. I do it all the time. I used to sit with the local hospice. I used to go up there all the time, the cancer hospice, and I used to sit with patients. And I didn't talk to them about the afterlife. It was purely me giving up my time to say, I've come to help you. I've come.
Yeah, I'd done that at the age of 18.
Yeah.
But no, I might have been just a bit younger than 18. I had Cane Hill Mental Hospital.
Yeah.
Out of the blue, I used to go up there and visit and talk with people.
Yeah, and I think it is about giving something back. I mean, there's a lot of charities that do approach me, and suddenly, the first thing they come out with, it's a charity event, and then the next words they come out with, so will you do it for free? And it's like, well, actually, no, it's my job. I've still got to make something. I've got to get something out of it. But by all means, I'll donate some money to you. I'll give you some readings to raffle off. I'll give you something personal to raffle off, whatever. In terms of making it so you can make some more money from it or something.
Yeah. So you actually made £7,000 on the little bit that you done then.
Yeah, that's what we made.
Good.
That's what we made for the Children in Need, which we were so chuffed about because it was literally rushed through so quick at the last minute.
Yeah.
And it was brilliant. It was great.
Yeah. Well, they got millions that night, didn't they?
Yeah.
I can't remember. Absolute millions.
Yeah, it is, and you know, I mean, there's a lot of charities that I support. I mean, a lot of them are on the website. You know, things from dementia to, you know, children in need to the Dogs Trust to, God, I've lost track of it now. You know, diabetes, all these sort of things. I mean, even my own mum, she passed with basically like crumbling of the spine, you know, osteoporosis of the spine, you know, and I've tried to support them even more because obviously the situation that we had to deal with my mum. And some people just don't want to know. You know, some charities do not want to know because of what we do.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's hard really on us because you know, yes, okay, we have a passion in what we do, but we're not religious in any major way. You know, we're doing this because we believe in what we do. And we want to help people raise money for a cause. I mean, I've done it for a local school the last couple of years, and they were trying to send some students off to, I think it was Zimbabwe, if I remember, to go and build some huts and to go and educate some children out there and that. And it was like, what a fantastic job, you know, absolutely brilliant. And in the end, one of the events, we'd actually agreed a fee. And in the end, I turned around and said, forget the fee. I don't want it. You know, I want you to put it towards something that you can do with it.
Yeah.
You know, and I like doing things like that. You know, it's not
satisfying.
Yeah, it's not all about the money at the end of the day. You know, you know, it's funny, isn't it? Because as a medium, you know people that genuinely need help.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll meet people out in the street, or somebody will come and talking to me at an event and say they don't ask me for a reading, but they'll tell me things, and then I'll say, you need to come and see me, and they say, we can't afford it, and I say, no, you need to come and see me. You know, and I don't charge them anyway. You know, it's almost like, yeah, just come and see me.
Yeah.
You know, even if you just come and have a coffee chat with me, I will help you. And funnily enough, one of my friend's sons, just going through a similar scenario, he's been a little bit sort of down and depressed. And bless him, he rang me up the other week and said, I need a reading. And I said, no, you don't. You need to just come and see me.
Yeah, because it's not all about that, is it?
No.
It is about being a friend to somebody that supports.
And Barrie, have you found actually, strangely, the readings that you've given for free are probably the most accurate ones? Because that's what I found.
I would say so, yeah, because you're not under any pressure.
Mm.
You know what I mean? You know, you're not, it sounds horrible, but you're not performing for anybody.
Yeah,
It's like what comes through just comes through. And because, you know, like with my friend's son the other week, we were just genuinely just having a chat like we are now.
Mm.
And then suddenly I'm going, you've lost your dad, haven't you? You know, your dad's here. And I mean, I didn't know much about him at all, really. And he's going, yeah, I didn't have much to do with my dad, you know, and suddenly all this information starts coming out just through a general conversation.
Yeah,
you know?
I found similar with the events that I do, certainly, that obviously I do the psychic fairs and the clairvoyant nights and things, and I think the information I give hopefully is okay, but I found randomly, if I'm in a pub somewhere and I'm just talking to somebody, I just feel that they might feel a bit down, or they're kind of looking for a bit of direction. There was one particular one last month, actually, around about Halloween time, and there was a lady there who was part of an audience, and I was basically getting nothing right for her, and she was just saying no. That wasn't the case for the whole evening, but just this one particular lady, and she was at the bar, and I was talking to her, and she was kind of asking me, you know, why didn't you get anything handy, and I just felt, unfortunately, I don't know, I couldn't quite get the connection, and yet the bar girl behind there hadn't paid anything for the night because she was just working there, and I suddenly started tuning into her because I could kind of feel that, because she was asking me a few questions about what I do and how I do it, and I could just feel that she was wanting a reading, but she didn't quite know how to express it. And I just started tuning into her, and whack, I was getting like everything, almost to the stupidest minute detail, right about her life and people around her, and she ended up in tears in the end. Good tears, not bad tears, but she was just like blown away. And the woman, ironically, who I was trying to tune into but said no all along, was at the bar at the same time, and she was gobsmacked, because I'm pretty sure she thought I was a complete fraud because I didn't get anything right for her, and yet, you know, the bar girl, it was all correct.
It's funny, isn't it? Because you know when you do an event, you've got to perform. Whatever you want to call it, you've got to perform to people.
You have to, yeah. You have
know,
to.
If you're not, that's the sort of comments you get back is, oh well, you know, you're a fraud, you're a fake, you can't do it, blah blah blah. And even at the end of a show, you know, and you always get to the end, you know, when it's like packing up time and you're trying to literally get everybody out the door as quick as you can. And you always get the one person who will come up to you and say, "Do you see anything around me now?" You know, have you got any messages for me now? And you think, and you know, this is what I say about, you know, people think we are almost like performing monkeys.
Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't walk around my local Asda and start suddenly giving somebody a message that I got the dad with me. I mean, number one, I'd probably be locked up. But number two, you know what? It's a sign of respect. You know,
do you know something, Barry? Nobody has ever given me a message.
Oh, bless you.
No, and sometimes I could really do with one, but nobody has read me.
Well, do you know what? You know, the way to look at it is that there's people out there that must need it more than you do at the moment.
I don't think so.
Yeah. But it is, though, isn't it? I mean,
there more than likely is, but, you know, there is something very, very big happening with me at the moment, and has been for the last, quite a few months, but nobody's able to pick up on what it is. Or nobody's, you know, maybe because I don't push. You know, I know what's going to happen.
It could be. I'm going to be really honest, Irene. I think it's an energetic block. Pardon the pun with your surname, but I think you've got some kind of like energetic field, and I found this with some people that because this woman at the bar, this woman who like said no to pretty much everything I said. She seemed like she wanted a reading, but I could kind of feel at the same time like blocked in some way, like she said she was open, but in some other way it's like she didn't want to hear it, and I don't know if that's going on with you or not. But
do you know, Andrew, there's another point to that, because I did an event about a year ago actually now.
Oh, sorry about the snoring, by the way, Barry. She's off.
I did an event at Dudley Castle about a year ago, and I remember I was, you know, I got these people in the corner, and I'm giving them all this information, and they're going, no, and I'm going, look, I know it's you. I've got it for you. That's where I'm drawn to. I know it's for you. And they went out of there saying, no, didn't get any of that. Do you know what? The next day I got an email from the daughter that was there, who then spoke to her grandmother, that then confirmed everything that I'd said, even down to names and dates, every detail. And she'd come back and said, I'm absolutely blown away of all the information that you gave that night. And she says, we didn't know you at all. We'd never seen you before. You know, my mum didn't know you. And yet everything that you gave, once we took it away and checked it up, and this is a little bit probably like the woman that you're talking about, who was sat there going no all the time.
Yeah.
Maybe if she'd have took that information away with her and gone and spoke to some member of the family or somebody, and suddenly, you know, all these things starting coming into place. Yeah,
definitely. And I think it's very good for the medium to hear feedback. A, so they don't go away and think, oh, well, I'm a load of rubbish and give up. But B, it completely destroys the kind of the James Randi, Derren Brown argument. Well, it's just cold reading. It's just reading off what the person has told you, because they don't know the information at the time. They've had to go and check it.
No, but you see, again, that's another problem, isn't it? Because, you know, we talked about people always trying to put down what we do. And I'm talking about that in everything that we do, you know, the paranormal, you know, phenomena, everything, you name it. And I think that's the problem nowadays, is people are always looking for that excuse to say, you know what, Barry's no good, or no, Andrew's no good, or no, Irene's no good. But they don't look at those other bits. You know, it's funny, isn't it? You know,
nobody's ever said that about me.
No, but, you know, I can't remember what the phrase is now, but it's, you know, people never remember what you do right, but they'll always remember the one thing that you do wrong.
That's true.
You know what I mean?
Bias, basically.
Irene, just as remember the case we worked on in North Wales, and the reaction we got with that, especially with your insight, you found out this woman thought that her house was haunted and there was these ghosts, and through a lot of investigation, we found that she was the cause of it. She had some abilities, and her fears were actually manifesting in front of her. And which was kind of groundbreaking, really, for a case. But when we presented it to her, oh my God! Let's just say it did not go over well, and you know, she was one of those calling us fakes and frauds, and it's like, oh, okay, because she wanted there to be something real and evil there.
Yeah. This woman went to another medium, right? And she was told by this other medium that in the house that she lived in now, in the cellar, they used to perform witchcraft rituals, right? She never even had a cellar, and she never clicked.
There was no cellar, and yet she was seeing this old hag, like witch-like thing that was constantly scaring her. And she started telling us the story, and we tried to tell her, well, what's down in the basement? Oh, there is no basement. But the psychic just said you had a basement where they practice witchcraft. And she couldn't, that's what we had to deal with.
It's a good. I had one very similar to that, and I had a lady who was self-harming, for a long time actually, and she kept coming to me saying, "Look at all these marks, look at all these marks." And I remember I kept going round to the house and saying, "There's nothing there. There's nothing in your house." Yeah, there is. It gets me every night. And in the end, she actually admitted that she'd been self-harming herself, and it was I almost felt set up a little bit. It was almost like I'd got to prove her wrong or prove that something was there that was doing this.
Maybe she just wanted you to say that there was something there, so she had an excuse for her family and friends.
Yeah, exactly.
Because she didn't want to admit to them she was self-harming.
But it's a horrible situation, isn't it? I mean, I hate being thought of that I'm being set up by somebody, and it's, why would somebody do that? But ultimately, people at the end of the day want to disprove what we do.
Oh, that's true. One other thing now, I've got to fit this in. Did you enjoy it when you went on Most Haunted?
Do you know what? I did, guys, and I loved it. They were a great bunch. It's a great team to work with. I mean, I still keep in touch with a lot of them, actually, to tell you the truth, and we've met up a few times. Absolutely loved it. I mean, and hand on heart, and I really do mean this, hand on heart, I never knew where I was going to. All I knew is that I was turning up at a hotel at this time. That was it. That was my room booked in. But I didn't know what venue I was going to, what it was like, whether it was a house, a castle, haunted home, whatever. I knew nothing about it.
So you weren't working from scripts?
Yeah, I honestly, hand on heart, I can admit that I knew nothing, and I didn't. And even when I got there, they told me no information. There was nothing lying around. If anything, if there was any of these sort of like historical boards or anything, they're either all covered up or they're all moved out of the way. Okay, that told you things. So seriously, I knew nothing. I was going in almost like naked, as I refer to it. I don't do it, and I never have on any of my events. I've never pre-investigated an event because I know a lot of the history that people put on websites isn't real. I know that people make it up because they want a haunted building.
Yeah.
And, I'll tell you a story about that in a minute, actually. But yeah, I loved it. We had a great laugh. How
many episodes did you do?
I only did 3 with them because then I moved on to another program after that, or another task, let me say. But it was brilliant. I mean, the one that I did in Pembury Woods, I mean, it was something like...
Oh, that's down the road from me.
Oh, good gosh. Do you know what? I remember being sat on the beach, stood on the beach, and we're all dressed very sort of smart in like nice leather jackets and jumpers and things. And it was something like -7 on the beach. And we were there and they're going, "What can you see in the woods? What, can you sense anything?" I think the only thing I want to do here is go and get a cup of tea and warm up. But some of those were filmed over 3 days, don't forget. That's the one thing I want to say. As with any show, I've never known a show not be filmed over such a long period of time. There's a lot of downtime.
I tell you what, it's a shame I didn't know you then, because I'm only about 10 miles up the road.
Oh, bless you. Yeah, you could have come along and annoyed me, you see.
I could have done, couldn't I?
But I'll tell you a story now, and I'm not going to name the venue, okay? But I remember once there was everybody was jumping on the bandwagon for this well-known venue that Most Haunted had done. And I remember that I was then working for a very well-known ghost hunting company in Nottingham at the same time. And we actually rang them up. And I remember we spoke to the receptionist. She says, first thing she said is, "Why do you want to come here?" And we said, "Well, hey, it's haunted, isn't it?" She says, "I've worked here for 30 years. She says, "Trust me, this place isn't haunted. We've never heard a damn thing here in 30 years. And it's like, and I thought...
It just looked the part.
She was honest.
The place just looked the part, did it?
Yeah, it did. It did. But there's so many of them like that nowadays, isn't there? Yeah. There's so many venues, and I've been to some. And, I remember doing Guy's Cliff House in Warwick, and this is one for Andrew now. I remember doing Guy's Cliff House in Warwick, and we were sat in... It's basically a Mason's sort of like meeting place now, and it's an old house. And I remember we were sat in what was the chapel, and there was me and another lady who actually owned the ghost hunting company at the time. I was sat in front of her, and she was sat behind me. Literally, both at the same time, we looked at each other, and we'd literally just got a torchlight, looked at each other, screamed, ran out of the place, and I said to her, "What did you see then?" She says, "I don't know, but it wasn't you." And I said, "That's exactly what I saw. I didn't see you either." I said there was something in between us, almost like a black mass that had almost pushed its way in between us, that was trying to force us to get out of the room quick. And it was so funny at the time when we look. Well, when we look back now, it was hilarious because we're meant to be the professional ghost hunters, and yet we've run out of the room screaming.
That's what I find funny, you know, because like Mark, nothing frightens me. Literally nothing frightens me that's paranormal. You know, a spider maybe, but that's about it. But to hear you talk about being frightened.
I'm sorry. I know. I'm so sorry.
You're a big wuss.
I am. Honestly, I am. But but then there is times, where actually I want to do a proper ghost hunt.
Yeah.
I want to do a proper ghost hunt. I want to go with 3 or 4 people. I use a couple of private venues that I can get access to. That'll just say, look, Barry, you can come along anytime you want. And I'll go with a group of friends. Sometimes a friend's birthday party, and we do a proper ghost hunt where I'm not performing. I'm going along just to experience it. And I think those sort of events are the times when you get proper paranormal activity. And I think it's long gone nowadays where people do proper ghost hunts because, they want to do it all for public. They want to do it for the money. They want to do it for the big shows.
Or they want to get that one photograph.
Well, it's like Mark said, isn't it? Everybody wants to be the next major TV show, whatever you want to refer to it as. And it spoils it. It really spoils it.
Mm. Well, I tell you what, we've all done TV, and I'm not me, and I know Mark. We're just not taken with it. We're not interested.
I mean, some of the nicest things I've done, or better things that I've really enjoyed, was like when I do like ITVs This Morning, and I'm working with people like Chris French, and Chris almost tries to disprove what I do.
I was watching that this morning on YouTube.
And I'm fine with him disproving it, but then suddenly when I'm agreeing with him and he's going, "What, you really agree with me?" I'm going, "Yeah, I do actually, Chris. I agree with you." And it's almost like, "Oh right," and I've stopped him in his tracks then.
Yeah.
But
taking the wind out of his sails.
Say again.
Taking the wind out of his sails.
Yeah. But this is where I get, people think that, it's hard to put a branding on certain individuals, but people think that because we're into the spiritual realms, everything's spiritual and lovey-dovey and bright lights and
hairy-fairy.
Yeah, and it's not. It's absolutely rubbish. I would sooner sit there and say, well, actually, no, I can tell that photo's a total fake because it's been photoshopped.
Well, I've got to admit, you are more down to earth than most of them that I've met. A lot of them, and Mark knows this as well, that I hate hairy fairies.
Yeah.
Anybody that's hairy.
I call it love and shite.
Yeah.
Love and shite. I'll remember that one.
Well, that's a good one.
Experience.
It's like when people talk about love and light, I just walk away.
Yeah. And Barry, have you found
I can't stand that.
The ones that talk about love and light are the ones with the most glinting daggers behind their backs.
Oh gosh, yeah. Yeah, and you know what? That's the other problem, isn't it? I've never worked in a profession, let's call it, with so many people wanting to put a knife in your back.
Yeah, totally.
Honestly, it drives me mad. Ghost hunting companies, I get so infuriated with them.
There's so much infighting.
Oh, yeah. If you want to run a business. Don't start watching what everybody else is doing. Concentrate on your business, get it up and running and get it working. Same as mediums. You know what? Forget about what everybody else does. Do it how you want to do it. Stop trying to impress people.
Mm. There's a lot of ego. Ego.
Yeah. And there is, even in between the churches, and the societies out there's a lot of backbiting and everybody wants to be the best. Everybody wants to be number one. And that's why I started pulling away from a lot of it, because I just couldn't be doing with all this sort of like, well, I'm better than you and you're not better than me. And it's like, oh, I don't do it for that, guys. I do it because I enjoy what I do. People very often ask me, Barry, are you religious? No, I'm not religious at all. I'm a spiritual person. I treat people how I want to be treated in response and in reply. My mum was Catholic. My dad was Church of England. My mum's family used to sit with a local priest doing table levitation and seances in Glasgow. My dad's side was, very formal Church of England, But my mum, luckily enough, and my father both agreed that they wouldn't have any of us baptised. Because they wanted us to choose our route in life. The only reason I was baptised Church of England is because my sister wanted me to be godparent to my 2 nieces, and the church said, no, you can't because you've not been baptised. But, as soon as I got baptised, I fell out with the local vicar. Because as soon as he found out what I believed in, it was almost, well, you can't do that. And I said, but you talk to the same people. You talk to the Holy Ghost and, you talk to people who don't exist anymore and you pray for loved ones. Well, it's no different to what I do.
Let me ask you a question. This is going to be a little kind of off kilter here. Since you've just mentioned, you're spiritual but not religious, and since you are able to communicate and interact with these spirits, and I use that word spirits with air quotes because, I think I'm reclassifying what I think we're dealing with. So as you who actually deals with it, what are your thoughts on the spirit world such as it is? I mean, or ghosts? Do you feel that more often than not you're dealing with people who've died and they're just off in the spirit world? Or do you think we're dealing with a completely different form of existence, where another type of reality? Because I'm starting to look at, with what science has been starting to understand in forms of, we've mentioned string theory before and other theories, that there are multiple realities that overlap our own. Time is an illusion. We only perceive time as being linear. So if we are here on this physical plane and this is just one existence, the spirit world, is that just one existence where the spirits, when they die, they go and they lived forever? Do you believe in reincarnation? Do you believe that it might be much different than what we try to perceive it as being?
I mean, you've thrown such a lot in there in such a big question. I think the first thing is, yes, I do believe in reincarnation. I believe in past life regression. I believe that we've all been here before. I believe that us four, for instance, have all met in a previous life in some sort of way, or we've all communicated in a previous way. And I really do believe in that. I think, when the spirit dies, yes, it goes to another source. But, then we talk about spirit being reborn, for instance. So how is it that I can talk to somebody's grandmother in the spirit world, and yet somebody then says that grandmother's been reborn? There's got to be an element there of almost being able to, I suppose, splitting the spirit, hasn't there? Where that person can be in two places at the same time. There's no other way with it. And I think that goes back again to what we were saying about the extraterrestrial sort of side. There's a lot out there that we can't physically explain, and none of us know it. And, I talk to people in terms of mediumship, and I say, we all growing on a daily basis. I've learned so much from you guys tonight, and hopefully vice versa, that, it's made me go away now and think, actually, what Mark said there really makes sense to me. That's made me change now in terms of the views that I've been looking at. But I think there is so much that none of us can explain and that we don't know yet. Maybe it's not our time to understand it. But I do think that there are other forms, other lives. I think there's other places, as you said, in inverted commas, out there where none of us have experienced. And maybe we never will, But why is it that when people are passing over to the spirit world, and I sat with my own mother while she was passing over to the spirit world, who talked to me about all the family that was with her. I mean, bless her, she, my mum even turned around and told me that she even said, "Oh, your brother's here," and my brother is still alive, but in spirit, she knew he was there with her at the side of the bed. Okay, and these are all the things that start coming through. And you could say, when people are passing over to the spirit world, is it purely a case that they just start hallucinating? Or is it a case that they actually see people waiting there to collect them and that they're ready to collect them? And why is it that can give them so much detail? I was talking to a lady the other week who was telling me that she was very close to death. And she said, I knew I was because my dad was sat at the end of my bed. But she said he got up and walked away. And she said, that's when I realised it wasn't my time. So, why is it that when people have major car accidents, and suddenly, they're aware of this spiritual form, whatever it is, whether it be an angelic form or whatever, that almost just pulls them out of it to say, actually, it's not your time to go yet. You've still got work to do. And interestingly enough, I mean, I had a day of bookings today at home, and I was talking to this one young lady about, giving this information from her mother, and I'm not going to go into it too much detail. And suddenly, all I got from her mum was that this girl wanted to commit suicide. And I turned to her and I said, "You've never thought about that, have you?" And she says, "Yeah, I have." She says, "I didn't want to be here anymore." And it was almost like, blimey, and then, that's where that almost counselling skill comes in then, doesn't it? Where you think, actually, I've got to be really careful here because this is somebody that's really not been coping well with the situation that they're going through. So I know I'm answering lots of questions here, all in one big bubble, and I'm trying to get as much in as I can.
Well, I did ask a really humongous question there, so I know I threw you for a loop.
I do agree, Mark. I think there is so much out there that we physically could not know, because our minds just wouldn't cope with it. I do think that. I mean, I've had personal experiences, when I've done past life regressions, even for myself, or I've been put through past life regressions, where there's been circumstances that I could never physically know. I mean, people that know me know that I've always had this fascination with the Titanic, massive, massive fascination with the Titanic, and even as a child, I used to sit there and look at books and analyse books and things. Now, I don't know, you could argue, well, maybe that was just me filling my mind with information. But why was it that I had this really vivid life of being on board this ship and knew everything almost about it without, with being just a child? Do you know what I mean? It was almost as though, maybe it was me that was pre-filling my mind up with information, or maybe it was a point that maybe I had been there before and I did know something about it.
I had a dream once when I was about 23 years old, and it was so vivid at the time and this is one of those things where you realize later it could be a past life dream, is I suddenly found myself as an American soldier in a running battle through this field with flowers, and it felt like it was in Europe somewhere during World War II. And I'm in a running firefight against German troops, and I suddenly felt a bullet hit me square in the chest. I dropped to the ground. I was like a little stunned and a little shocked, and I tried grabbing for a grenade to throw it because I still was trying to be in the fight, but I was a little confused. And another bullet hits me in the chest. I dropped the grenade behind me, and it went off. And I felt it. It felt like, no pain, but it felt like getting smacked upside the head with a huge feather pillow. Everything went instantly black. And then I woke up in bed, struggling with breath. And, it stuck with me, and I thought, oh, that was kind of strange, and I didn't really think much of it. And then a few years later, I went and saw the movie Saving Private Ryan. And the type of scenery and the location where it was, I'm now convinced it was in Normandy. So it's
it's interesting. There's a show called Ghost Inside My Child, which I'm sure you've heard of, Mark, and seen, that goes through that kind of thing where kids actually remember some of their past lives and almost sometimes do what they think is ghosts that actually turns out to be themselves in a past life.
Yeah.
Which on a quantum physics kind of parallel dimensions level is absolutely bizarre. So there's one particular kid who I think he kept seeing this ghost of a soldier or an airman or something in his cupboard, and it actually turned out that this child was looking at himself in a past life, and it's almost like this ghost of himself was kind of like telling him that everything's going to be all right in this life. But he was talking to himself in a weird way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I had one client that used to come see me, and I got to know this girl. I got to know her quite well, really, after a period. Became friends in the end. And then her daughter, she had a daughter, and her daughter became so spiritually open. And this daughter used to tell the mum. She used to say, "Grandma's with me. She's been and she's telling me this about you, and she's shown me this picture, and she's given me this name." And this was a child who was, probably 4 or 5 years old, and the information what she was passing on to my friend, on to Joanne, was just unbelievable, and Joanne's going, what do I do? What do I do? She says, do you think she's read it? Is it, and I said, well, where would she know this information from your past relatives? There is no physical way that somebody would have sat with her and said, this is your family tree. These are all the people that were in it, and it was just phenomenal. The information that was coming out. And even now, Joanne will ring me up and say, she's told me this and I can't believe it. Or, a mum will be down and she'll say, Grandma's with you, she's trying to pick you up again. And you think, this is phenomenal, what children are getting into now, or what they're seeing, really.
There's a friend of mine, actually, who's got a very, very psychic daughter. I mean, she's quite psychic herself. And this daughter kept talking about the two boys, playing with the two boys.
Yeah.
And she was like, I won't use her real name, but she was saying, Sarah, what are the two boys? What are you talking about, the two boys? Oh, don't worry, Mummy, they come to see me at night, but they're dead. It's like, and this little tot is something like, must be about 3-4 years old.
Oh.
How would a little tot like that? I mean, what a thing to say.
Yeah.
I mean, kids watch, cartoons and stuff. They're not really watching Most Haunted, and she's a very responsible mum. She doesn't, she wouldn't let her daughter see anything remotely like horror or chillers or anything. So how would this little, and she said it quite matter of fact. She didn't say, "Oh, they're dead." She just said, "Oh yeah, they're dead." As if she's talking about a cup of tea. What's on for tea?
I mean, but that is phenomenal. That is good. I mean, to me, that's just, you can't question it, can you? Do you know what I mean? It's almost like, well, how would she physically know?
Yeah.
A little bit like I say about my friend Joanne, her daughter, exactly the same. How would they know that amount of information?
Mm.
And, I'm a firm believer, everybody's born with a psychic ability. And I think all that happens is over lifetime, you're almost conditioned of what you should do and what you shouldn't do. And suddenly this ability just leaves you, it just moves to one side, because your mind's seeing something. But on the other hand, you've got mum and dad there saying, no, that's not real. No, you haven't got an imaginary friend at all. It's almost like you're forced to believe what somebody else wants you to believe all the time.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like a society thing.
Yeah.
There's a friend of mine, very very psychic. Now there seems to be a correlation between people who have had near-death experiences come out of their body and then gone back, and kind of like psychic ability. I've heard this on more than one occasion. This particular friend of mine has had 3 occasions where technically she's been dead and had near-death experiences. Not just 1, not just 2, but 3. She is now hugely psychic. She's one of the most psychic people I know, to the point where Neil, one of our other hosts of Paranormal UK Radio, he has a little High Wycombe paranormal meetup group, and we just do little silly things and talks and all sorts, really. And one particular time I did an ESP class, and I did a workshop on like telekinesis, and I had psi cards, and I'm sure you guys know what psi cards are. They're kind of symbols on cards. Now, and for people listening to this, they're kind of stars and wavy lines and kind of circles and squares, and the idea is you got to kind of like get the other person to read what the symbols were. Now, I believe they originated in the 1920s, and I believe there were 5 of them to begin with. I like to ramp things up, so I created my own psi cards, and I created 10 of them to make things a bit more difficult. So I had things like dots and like curly things and all sorts. Now, this particular person, who I won't name for the moment, she got 100% score. It was a 1 in 10 chance 10 times in a row. So we worked out the odds of that being right 100%, 1 in 10 times in a row, as being 1 in a trillion chance, 10 to the power of 10. And she got it 100%. And it was absolutely bizarre. And the person she was working with was a very scientific, grounded guy. He wasn't giving anything away, and he was covering like the back of the card so she couldn't see it. And she was closing her eyes anyway, in terms of kind of tuning in and kind of seeing what it was. I've never known, I've done a few workshops, I've never known anyone at all to get 100%. Some people get 3 or 4, and that's pretty good, and it was just unheard of. And she's had 3 near-death experiences and massively psychic. I don't know if you've come across that before, Barry.
That is phenomenal. It really is, and
it blew everyone away. Everyone in the room was was like, what?
I mean, it jogged my memory actually, because I remember once we did a paranormal convention. It was in Derby, and they wanted me to do a blindfold Ouija board session with them, because what they wanted to prove or disprove was the fact that I was pushing it to the certain letters. And in the end, I said, yeah, I'll do it, not a problem. And funnily enough, it still managed to spell out things, even though I'd got my eyes, I'd got blindfolds on, and all I got was a finger on something. That was it. I didn't know where it was going. They'd even spun the board around, so I couldn't even push it in the direction I wanted to, if that makes sense. If I wanted to.
You know what would make that interesting, Barry, is if everyone around the table had blindfolds on.
Well, exactly. I mean, that'd be the next thing, and I've tried to do this before, at conventions, and say, come on, let's do a fully blindfolded Ouija board session, so that nobody knows where the letters are, and even do it to the point where people aren't around the table when they're blindfolded, and they're actually put in position, so that you wouldn't know where you were.
You could set something like that up with a camera on the board, and then have somebody else remote monitoring it.
Well, that's one of the things that we used to do. We used to put the camera above the table so that it could actually look down on top, if you know what I mean. So I think, like you said, Irene, the next sort of step would be to do a fully blindfolded one where people are actually led around the table and placed in a seat or standing, so that nobody knows where they are, and try and prove it. But I love things like that. I love being pushed to the boundaries, to see if it still works, to see if it's going to work the same.
So when you done it, it worked.
It worked, yeah. When I was the only one blindfolded, and obviously the rest of them was out of the audience, so nobody else had got any. Well, not that we know of. Nobody had got any sort of other psychic ability. So it was purely me on the glass with them, and I can't remember how many there were, probably 5 or 6 of them. And I was the one that was blindfolded, so that I couldn't push it in any direction.
And it still gave out answers.
It still spelled out names. It still went towards the person it wanted to communicate to. It still gave out information.
That definitely outruled you then, didn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And even when I do an event, I always say to people, look, I won't touch anything unless you specifically ask me to. I won't touch anything. And if I've got a group of 6 people working on a Ouija board, I'll stand outside of the circle, but I'll still be giving them information from it. And suddenly what you find is, the pointer starts going to the right sort of answers, or, confirming almost what I've given them in terms of names and things. And I think that's the way I like it to be. I don't like to touch equipment when I'm working, because I don't want people turning around and saying, yeah, we've seen him push that.
Well, Barrie, that's a massively cool interview, and I hope you'll come back and join us again at some point. But unfortunately, we've got to wrap up now. But if there's any books or websites or anything you want to kind of plug at this point, then feel free.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant, and thanks so much. As I said, I've really enjoyed it, and it's great to work on such a professional show, guys. Thank you. Guys, if anybody wants to get hold of me, you can get hold of me on the website, which is www.barriejohn.com. You can get me on Facebook, Twitter. By all means, drop me any messages. I always try and respond to as many as I possibly can. It might take me a while, but I'll get back to you. And I've really enjoyed it. And thank you so much for having an open-minded group. I've really loved it.
Yeah, we will have definitely. If you want to come back, Barrie, we would love to have you back.
I would love to come back.
Have you read? But anyway, have you written any books?
I haven't. I'm in the process of writing one at the moment, and I'm in the process of writing a set of books at the moment.
Oh, yeah?
About people's development, tuition, looking at the paranormal. But I'm trying to do it with a little bit of because I think it needs to be brought into the modern realm nowadays.
Absolutely right.
Okay.
Well, Barrie, again, it's wonderful talking with you. Thank you for coming on, and we will have you back. And thank you, everybody, for listening to another edition of Paranormal UK Radio. You can hear us every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, here on Paranormal UK Radio Network. Irene, Andrew, we'll catch you all next time.